You should always try and get your coaches to say yes to the yeses. And I said, what's that? Just like you. So number one is safety. So I'll just list them. Safety, smiles, skills, sweat, and simple.
Welcome to the Cutting Edge Coaching Podcast, where we believe coaches are some of the most important teachers and leaders in the world, and they deserve to be supported. I'm your host, Luke Gromer, and every week we're bringing you conversations with coaches, experts, and leaders from across sports that will give you practical ideas and strategies that you can apply in your coaching to develop high-performing teams and high-character people. Coaches, I'm excited to welcome Vince Ganzberg to the podcast. Vince is the Director of Coach Education for United Soccer Coaches, and he has an extensive background as a coach and coach educator in soccer. In this episode, we talk about autonomy supportive coaching, the 5 S's of great coaching, tips on practice design, and more. If you enjoy this episode and want to grab a copy of the free podcast notes, just go to cuttingedgecoach.com/podcast or click the link in the show details to download a free PDF of notes from this episode or any episode. And coaches, we just wrapped up our first annual summer coaching series. And you can get access to the video replays, audio-only replays, coaching notes, and more from all 12 sessions at summercoachingseries.com. You can also check out the incredible lineup of guests we had and hear what other coaches had to say about their experience at summercoachingseries.com. And one note about this episode before we hop in. This conversation was recorded live at a coaching convention, so there may be a bit of background noise at times, but we did our best to edit the audio to bring you the highest quality possible. Now to my conversation with Vince Ganzberg. Enjoy the episode. Coaches, excited to welcome Vince Ganzberg to the podcast today. Vince, thank you so much for joining me, and I would love it if you just started off by giving the audience just a quick bio about your coaching journey and what you currently do.
Sure. Thank you for having me, and Happy New Year, and welcome to the United Soccer Coaches Convention. So a little bit about me. I am a high school teacher. I was a high school teacher and a high school coach, soccer coach, and basketball for 17 years, and primarily soccer. Basketball I did like 3 or 4 years. Then I left high school coaching to be the director of coaching education for Indiana Youth Soccer. I did that for 10 years. After that, I actually went back into the high school for a couple. And then U.S. Soccer reached out to me and said, will you design and create an online coaching course for parent coaches for 5 to 8-year-olds? So I worked for U.S. Soccer, our federation, and I was very proud to do that. And I did that for about 3 or 4 years. I was their coaching education consultant. But the past 6 years, I've been working for United Soccer Coaches full-time as the Associate Director of Coaching Education.
I love it. That's awesome. Well, Vince, let's start off and talk about a topic I know you're passionate about, autonomy supportive coaching practices. Can you just start off and define what that is for the audience? What's that mean? And then start talking about how do we do it?
Sure.
What does it look like to actually deploy those practices in our coaching?
Sure. Yeah, no, I think the simple way to put it is coaches empowering players during practice by giving them choice within boundaries. And it doesn't mean that you're not the coach and you don't plan and you don't teach or coach. It just means these are ways that you can empower your players while you're coaching in practice, whether it's an hour or an hour and a half or 45 minutes. Can you find different ways to empower them, to make a more inclusive environment, to make it less about me, the coach, and more about we, and basically just giving them some choices in practice. Again, though, you might have to put limits on them, but for the most part, that's really what it is. I would say it's a cousin of self-determination theory. It's right along those lines. And hopefully by giving them some autonomy, by giving them some choice, by making it less of a coach-driven environment and more of an athlete-centered environment, we can keep kids playing for a little bit longer.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. Will you share maybe some examples of how
Sure.
you do that with teams that you have coached or do coached?
Mhm.
And like, what would that look like in our practice design, or maybe even in our games, to do some things that give them ownership, that self-determination theory, that allow them to actually make meaningful decisions within the context of our team?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's certain things that go along, like a bullet list. If you Google autonomy supportive coaching practices, one of those is providing opportunities for allow players to practice independently while at practice. So, for example, as a lot of times when players arrive to practice, for example, in soccer, the kids would just stand and shoot in front of goal because that's what they love to do. Um, However, and that's fine. So once you get practice going, that's great. But what I do, and I do this even with the high school team that I coach in Indiana where I live, about the middle of practice, I'll tell them that they have 10 minutes to be great by choice. And I didn't tag that. I didn't come up with that. That was actually developed by a Scottish rugby coach by the name of Gregor Townsend, who basically used to coach the Scottish national team. And he allowed these professional, tough rugby players to take 10 minutes on their own to practice on what they needed to practice on independently. So how I do it with the youth, and I've done this as young as 9 and 10-year-olds, all the way to my high school players, is I just say you have maybe with younger kids it's 5 minutes. Maybe with the high school team, we call it 8 to be great. So they have 8 minutes to work on. For example, if they want to work on their first touch, well, maybe they juggle. If they want to work on striking a ball, well, maybe it's they strike a ball with a teammate. Or they can play a game, like a little backyard game that, like soccer, tennis. They can do that with their friends. So I give them suggestions, and then, or they can just kind of just relax and just be on their own for about 5 minutes, which if you coach little ones, it seems like an eternity. However, what it also allows you to do as a coach is to engage with those players kind of independently as they're practicing, not necessarily giving them tips on how to do it better, but just connecting with them. Say, hey, how's it going in school? Tell me about your new dog that you got, right? And just connecting with them. My high school players love it. They love it. And we started integrating it a little bit more in practice because they're like, Coach, can we keep doing this? And I had one young man said, Coach, I need to get fit. Can I just go run like the cross country little course, which is a mile? Sure. That's fine. Just take someone with you. Sure. So that's what he did.
And, he found a teammate to just run.
Yeah,
too.
He did.
That's a good teammate.
Yeah. No, I know.
Yeah.
Yes. But that's one.
Yeah.
Giving them some autonomy. And I like to do it in the middle of practice because it kind of breaks up the routine a little bit. It's funny because as coaches, we think we know what they need to work on, but it's funny, they might have something else in their mind. Or in soccer, for example, maybe they want to work on how do we bend the ball. So, hey, me and you, let's work on bending the ball, right? Or put a little swerve on it. Well, that autonomy allows them to explore on their own and figure out their own way to make that ball spin sideways so the ball bends. So there's a lot of neat little things that go in there. So that's one. The other is allow them to choose from a prepared list of activities during practice. So as a coach, you have a plan. We're going to work on, for example, I also, like I said, coach basketball. So maybe we're going to work on dribbling, with both hands or something like that. So I might have some activities that we either play before, or I might have to give a visual of what it looks like or explain it, and then let them choose. What I do is I have these diagrams and I laminate them, and I literally put them on the ground for the kids, and I say, all right, which of these 2 activities would you prefer to do right now? But I might do 3 of the 4 planned activities, but they get a choice of one of those. But it relates to what we want to work on. And it's funny how they're like shocked. They're surprised because they're so used to, like, in a classroom, a teacher telling them, hey, this is what we're doing. Same thing with the youth coach, this is what we're doing. But if you give them a little bit of choice, you'll see that players buy in what they help create.
Yeah. And I think one of the important things to note about what you're saying is, like, if a coach has reservations about this, it's not, we're saying the entire practice isn't this way.
Right.
But give them something. Start small. And once you do it, you realize, oh, wow, actually, this is improving the quality of practice, the quality of development. I'm enjoying this more. They're enjoying this more.
Yeah.
And to just give them some of it. I just reflecting on, as a player, I loved that too. Like, if a coach was willing to do that or ask for input, it is fun. It's empowering. We, like you said, we commit to what we help create. And and the other thing that I think is really powerful about what you shared there with the example of I think you called it 8 to great, those 8 minutes in the middle of your practice. Part of the reason it's so powerful is because it is a routine.
Right.
And routines are really, really powerful and important for our athletes. Routines, they reduce anxiety.
Yes.
Right? We know what's coming.
Yes.
I'm not stressed out about the what ifs. I know what's coming here. I know how to engage in this activity. My mind isn't engaged in learning something new, right? Or like a new game or drill.
Right.
And I love the point you made too of it can become a routine for you as a coach to use that 8 minutes to really connect.
Yeah.
Of, hey, my whole focus here is just to make sure I get a touch with every single athlete on my team.
Yeah.
Or maybe there's 4 or 5 specific, I really need to connect with them and just stand next to them as they're doing this. Ask some questions. Show that I care about them, right? I think that's so good. And it's so important for us to plan for that, right? To make a routine or a habit of giving them some autonomy, some choice. Because if we're not intentional about doing it, it just probably won't happen. Because, like you said, it's not the norm. Actually, at the beginning, athletes are like, what?
Yeah.
We get to choose what we do in practice? And I think it's important what you shared there too. It's not just anything.
Right.
Like, it's a menu of choices usually of things that will still be good for their development.
Yep.
And I think so much of it comes back to this experience for them should be about fun. Like, it's not about us as the coach. It's about their experience. So we should allow them to have a say in it.
Yes.
To create some of it. And to remember that at the end of the day, if 10 minutes of our practice was spent on just some fun, that's okay too.
Yeah. No, it's, when I do the Great by Choice, or there's a college program actually in Michigan that they do it with their college athletes. They call it Pro Time. So, there's moments in there where, you can literally just not even have them practice. You can just talk with them and communicate with them and just reach out to them. And the other thing to go along with autonomy sort of supportive coaching practices are, it's called coaching out loud. Here's why we're doing what we're doing, or do you know what we're doing? And because a lot of kids don't understand, why are we doing this? Or you might make a coaching point and they're like, dude, does that make sense? And they nod their head and that they're no. So that's part of autonomy supportive coaching, is giving them a chance to have an interaction with you. And it helps you check for understanding with them. And again, it makes it more of a we environment, not a me environment. And then when it comes to, other things, I mean, it's, give them a list of activities, independent practice, which a lot of times we tell kids what to work on, but we don't give them any time to do it. And we expect them to go do it at home, which some will, but we know a lot of them don't, unfortunately, these days, because there are a lot of distractions for these kids today. But those are the 2 big ones that I can discuss. But I think, like, for example, another way to do it is after they do an activity, you say, hey, so we just played that game. Are there any rules we need to change to make it more fair? Are there any rules to change to make it harder? What as we play, what does good look like? What does good sound like? Then let them go play. Or you let them go play, and maybe you come back and you ask them, hey, what did good look like there? What did good sound like there? So you're giving them the autonomy to think about while they're playing, as opposed to you hammering all these coaching points to them with a bullet point list. Just make it really simple and just say, what does good look like? And I that's another part of giving them a choice and having them, again, little say, do we need to change teams? And some kids say, yeah, they're killing us. But they come up with some creative things.
Well, yeah, and like you said there too, I mean, that's such a powerful question to ask to check for understanding.
Yes.
Because the reality is, hopefully, when you ask that question, what does good look like? They start to list off your principles of play, your game model, the habits that you've been trying to instill
Right.
that will help them be successful. And so if they start saying things about what good looks like that aren't on track,
Yes.
yeah, that is a point where we need to step in and say, okay, that's not it here.
Right. Right.
Like, or maybe they say this is what good looks like. They start playing, trying to do that.
Yes.
And you go, guys, we said this is what good, but what's happening here when
Right.
we try to play in this way, right? This is actually causing problems. Let's try it like this.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And even letting them try the method or the way they thought would work.
Yeah.
And maybe experience it if it fails. Like,
Yes.
that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a saying, learning should be messy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And good learning, I should say, should be messy. But yeah, I think as coaches, just simplifying things, a great coach can transfer knowledge and understanding. I've seen a lot of coaches have a ton of knowledge, but they can't really connect with, how do I take that knowledge and turn it into a simple phrase, metaphor for kids to understand it.
Yeah, and I think John Wooden said there's always a gap between I taught it and they learned it.
Perfect.
Like, can you identify and close that gap is so much of coaching. Because like you said, it's fine to have the knowledge up in your head, but if you can't transfer it to the young people or the players that you're coaching, and it doesn't actually show up in the game, it just doesn't matter. Yeah, right? Like, we've got to be able to do that and to be able to identify where we're struggling.
Yeah, right.
In that, where that gap is, to try to close it. We're never going to totally close it, right? But
right.
we can get closer to I taught it and they learned it.
Yes.
And I think what we've been talking about kind of leads into the next topic I want to talk about. Saying yes to the S's is how you put it. Tell us, what are the S's you're referring to, and why do they matter in our coaching?
Absolutely. Well, again, I'm not going to take credit for the phrase. It's a good friend of mine named Dr. Fritz Edel from Butler University, and I consult with him a lot because I write the education, the curriculum, and all that for United Soccer Coaches, and why not? He's working with education majors, PE teachers, at Butler, and he said, you should always try and get your coaches to say yes to the S's. And I said, what's that? Just like you. So number one is safety. So I'll just list them: safety, smiles, skills, sweat, and simple. So safety, as a coach, your number one priority, no matter what, is to make sure that those children are physically and emotionally safe. And because every child is a parent's limited or special edition, and it's the most prized thing that they ever, and the last thing they want is their child to come home from a practice hurt for something that you could have avoided, or you were really negative towards them and it really traumatized them. So just that's your number one priority. In my opinion, when you coach youth, you're coaching youth, but mainly you're coaching people first, and then the sports second. Smiles, fun, right? Just make sure that they have fun and that they're smiling and they're enjoying the game, they're enjoying practice. And as a coach, you might be the best thing going for that kid and in that time in their life. And as a coach, we need to smile when they come, and we need to greet them when they come and say, hey, it's great to see you every day. And I just think that as a coach, we can make a huge impact on their lives. And a lot of it's just by us smiling, them smiling, making sure it's fun. There's a phrase, and I think I read it with Ronaldinho, about Ronaldinho. He said, I don't want fans to see my face. I want them to see my soul when I play. And we want that for all of our kids. We want to see their souls and the enjoyment come out. Skills, kids come to learn. Kids come to be challenged. They come to get better at things, and that is proven. And so with this autonomy supportive coaching practice, a lot of people are like, well, what do you mean you just give them? No, you still have a plan. It's actually very challenging to plan this type of practice, but you still have a plan. You're still teaching. You're still coaching. You're still giving them information. But kids, if they're not being challenged and they're not learning, then they might drop out.
Yeah, and they'll definitely check out mentally of your practice.
Right.
If there's not that ideal level of difficulty and struggle and challenge, right? We want it to be hard enough to where there is some struggle, but not too hard to where they want to quit, or too easy to where it's just boring.
Yes.
It really is finding that sweet spot where they're struggling, but they can still find some success in the midst of it.
Yeah. And, just an idea, what I do a lot with younger players is I kind of take a video game approach. So you have an easy level, a middle level, and a boss level, or if you will. And sometimes I ask the kids, hey, do you want to do this one, or this one? You want to go to the boss level? And they go, yeah, let's do the boss level. Great. But they do, as a coach, it's really important that you teach them skills. You teach them the game, and you teach them whatever sport it is to be better and more competent, because when they're more competent, they're usually more confident. And then I think we had sweat. And here's where we got to be careful. It's not we make them run laps and we make them do shuttles until they don't feel good. It's basically just keeping them engaged physically, keeping them moving, because when the body's going, the mind's going together, they're gonna develop and get better.
As many as active as much as possible.
Absolutely.
Right? We don't want them standing in lines.
Right.
We want them playing. They're at practice to play the game. Like, they all need to be as active as possible for as long as possible.
Yes. Yeah. And I think as a coach, video yourself and forget about like what you say. Just see, as you watch yourself back on the video, how many minutes are they moving versus how many minutes are they not moving? And I think that some of us will be surprised. I know when I did it, I was like, oh, Vince, I just talk way too much. And that kind of leads me to the next point, which is simple. And I kind of alluded to it before, where, a really great coach can transfer knowledge into understanding. So we got to keep things simple, but meaningful. And there's a phrase from the book, Effective Modern Coaching, written by Miles Downey. I think he quoted The Inner Game of Tennis, written by Galway. And there's a phrase, potential minus interference equals performance. Every child has potential. Every team has potential. As a coach, we need to try and reduce or eliminate interference so they can perform. Well, interference could be we are overcomplicating things. We are trying to teach them things that they're not ready yet, or we're teaching them things that are too easy. But a lot of times we as coaches, we think we got to spit everything out. In other words, sometimes we just got to be really simple and maybe say a few words, let them experiment, let them explore, ask them how they feel about it. But it's really important that we just keep things really, really simple. Don't create interference with them. Interference could be something's happening at home. Interference, which, a lot of things you can't control. But what you can control is how you are as a coach when you're with them, either on the court, on the field, on wherever they're coaching. So it doesn't matter. But just being simple, making practices simple, because the less, the more challenging, confusing it is for you, it's going to come out. They're going to see it. I remember as a high school teacher, if I was teaching a new lesson, I would fumble through it for maybe a period or two. And then maybe by the fifth period, I would have it down because I've learned how to simplify it and all that. So those are the 5 S's. There are more, I'm sure, but those are the 5 that I use.
And I like that you brought up that example of the classroom there, but because the reality is for most of us, like we don't have the opportunity to rerun our practice 4 or 5 times.
Right.
If you're teaching the same lesson 4 or 5 times, you are way better at doing it on time 5.
Yes.
But in a practice setting, we usually have one go at it, right? And now you can come back to what you do and following practices, all that for sure. But we don't deliver the same practice over and over again. So I think that's, again, like to highlight what you said, it just makes it all the more important that our practice is simple.
Yeah.
And, one of the things that has been really impactful for me in my coaching and I'm really passionate about is like our practice design, game design, that needs to be really simple. And finding, like some coaches call them platform drills or platform games. Like it's the simple structure, the simple game that I can change with constraints or rules. We only actually have about 5 things we do in practice here, and I just tweak them a bunch, right? So that when I say, hey, we're setting up blank, they can get to it quickly, set it up quickly. We can get playing quickly, and then I can tweak it, change the rules, change the focus or emphasis to actually elicit that learning that I want to happen at that time.
Exactly.
That's one of the most powerful ways we can keep it simple.
Absolutely. That's a fantastic point. Just, you don't need 100 or 1,001 soccer drills. You just need like 5 or 6, or even that's even a lot. I mean, even 4 or 5 that just are go-to activities. Maybe you tweak it. So, for example, you play a 4-goal game. Maybe you turn the goals at angles so they have to figure out a different way to score. So perfect. Yeah, just you don't have to freak out with coming up with all these different activities. Just be simple. And, in soccer, U.S. soccer has the play, practice, play method, right? Where they play at the beginning, there's a little activity or 2 in the middle, and then they play at the end. And so there's a lot of playing and it's very simple. Yeah. It's very easy.
Yeah.
So,
and I think that the other piece of that too is to make sure not only our practice design is simple, but the skills that we're emphasizing in teaching, like we actually don't need to get complex, because I think anybody in any sport can actually sit down and identify, here's like the 4 or 5 habits or skills that impact everything else the most. Yeah. In basketball specifically for me, and I think the equivalent of this might be the first touch in soccer, right? Like the first touch is everything in soccer. Your ability to control your first touch dictates everything you do after that. In basketball, it's the ability to catch the ball and play with vision from there, right? I call it like peeking. Right?
Yeah,
when you catch it, where do your eyes go? So that we can make that next play or find an advantage, exploit an advantage. And it's like, we should spend more time on those things. Like stop trying to get complex with these skills that you're teaching them, and emphasize, teach these core habits that actually affect all those other things the most. They'll develop some of those higher level skills on their own through playing or individually as they feel more competent and confident. Right. But it's so important that we identify what actually matters, what's actually going to impact their performance, that maybe isn't as obvious when we watch them play. Right. Right. But when they have these habits become ingrained, it makes a massive difference in their performance.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't want to take too much of your time, but so there's this thing called external focus of attention, where as a coach, instead of worry about the body mechanics, you ask that they watch the effect of the technique. So for example, basketball, and you're speaking my other language, because I am from the Hoosier State, and basketball's a religion. I had no choice. There was an ABA ball in my crib when I was a little boy. And, when you're a basketball player, my dad, when he was teaching me how to shoot a basketball, he'd say, all right, Vince, point your elbow to the basket. And when you shoot, follow through, put your hand in the hoop, but also try to get backspin on the ball. Get backspin on the ball. And so that way, if I didn't get backspin on the ball, I knew that I didn't follow through enough with my wrist, so I could correct my body mechanics. In soccer, it's when you strike a ball, shoot a ball, a really good shot on goal has little to no spin, or it dips. So like the Rose Lavelle goal that she scored in the World Cup final, couple years ago. That ball dipped. She hit that ball perfect. A lot of times as coaches, we say, lock your ankle, use your shoelaces, plant your non-kicking foot next to the ball. That's internal focus. But if we can get kids to think about also external focus, now they might be able to improve their mechanics internally. So related to that, I mean, so for example, you watch any basketball player, no basketball player shoots the ball the same way. Larry Bird, who is still a legend in our state, if you watch how he shot the ball, his feet would be pointed sideways. He would be turned sideways, but he had his elbow pointed at the basket for the most part, and he followed through, and he always had backspin on the ball. Thank goodness Bill Fitch didn't say, hey, Larry, you're not shooting that ball right. In other words, he figured, or their coach, his college coach. In other words, the coach didn't try but he had the basics, to your point, the 2 or 3 things internally, mechanically, and then the external things come. So I think as coaches, if we can use that type of language, hey, see if you're trying to bend the ball, try and make the ball spin sideways.
Yeah.
So try and figure out how to do that.
Yeah. Because this is something that I've been challenged on too, especially with our bodies. And I'm not an expert on this, but as I learn more, it's like there really isn't this one right way to do motor skills with motor learning.
Right. Yeah.
And shifting our language to that external focus of just try to make the ball do this.
Yes. Yeah.
And then let them figure it out with their body.
Yeah.
I think can be really powerful. And because the reality is, like you said, like all of our bodies are different. Like
yes.
We can't, I can't, shoot it the exact same way that someone else can.
Exactly. Right.
Because maybe it's height, stature, but like all these different things can play into it. And so I think it's important for us to just consider, okay, I'm going to focus less on the perfect technique here and just see if they can achieve this outcome, right? In a way that works for them.
Yeah.
And again, it doesn't mean that we can't be directive and coach specific things, but it is a recognition that, there isn't just one solution.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. And let them find their way and give them some autonomy to figure out their way.
Yeah.
And so that's where independent practice comes in.
Yeah.
In practice, let them go go try and just make the ball spin sideways. Go. Get with a teammate. You can do dyads, where they're actually observing each other and helping each other out. So there's a lot there. And but those are the 5 S's. And I hope that, and the external focus of attention, I wanted to bring that up too, because I think it's part of autonomy supportive coaching practices.
Yeah, that's really good. Oh, Vince, I have one more question for you, and then a few rapid fire questions.
Oh boy.
I'm curious because I'm a fellow teacher as well. Teach 9th grade English.
Oh.
I'm curious. 17 years in the classroom. Is that right?
Yes.
What you said?
Yes.
Most coaches don't have an education background. Oftentimes.
Right.
What are some of the teaching practices that you are intentional about? These are effective teaching practices in the classroom, and I also deployed these in my coaching. Right? Really, I guess the question is how as coaches can we be better teachers? What were the things that you took from the classroom onto the field that you found to be really, really important? And I think maybe what you talked about was simple ties into that, but how can we be better teachers?
Yeah, I think practice design is one. I mean, when I was a teacher, I never went in without like a plan. Whether as I was teaching to the state standard or in a sport, you're teaching to right. You have a theme in mind. So come in with a mind, with a plan in mind. That's one. 2, instead of me telling them how to do things in the classroom, I'm questioning them to pull information out of them as opposed to push information out of them. So that's the second. And then third, make it, when I was a school teacher, I used to drive my principals nuts because we'd have snowball fights in the classroom they'd write a question on a piece of paper, wad it up, and we'd have snowball fights. And then we pick up the snowballs, pick it up. Yeah, I drove. So I try to always make it engaging and fun and to make it to where they don't practice coming to practice isn't a chore. It isn't like, oh my gosh, I got to go to practice. So I always, because one thing I always took pride in, my students like, this is my favorite class.
Yeah.
Right. And it's one of the best things a teacher can hear, you know.
Even if they hate your subject, they can still enjoy being in your class.
Yeah. And so those are three main things. And just remaining. Now, at first, I'll be honest. At first, I was not a positive coach. I was a junior Bobby Knight. I was a yeller. I yelled the vision. And then over time, I realized, okay, that works for him, but I shouldn't try to be like him. I got to be more like me. So I realized that I looked myself in the mirror and said, okay, Vince, you gotta fix some things about you. And it wasn't that kids are quitting or whatever, but if I had a chance to go back and do it again, I would totally do it differently. And hopefully, better, if not the same results, if not better. But I think just being positive and just realizing that my self-worth isn't dependent on whether or not we win or lose this game. And as a teacher, you want all your kids to pass. And I always took it personally to me when a kid failed, when a kid got an F, and I always, teach. I know some teachers are like, well, they did it. They earned the F. Well, maybe, but how could I have worked with that kid a little bit better? So those are some of the lessons that I think. And I think as coaches too, we need to understand, like in youth sports, maybe it's just me, but in youth sports, when they come to practice, it really should be almost an extension of the classroom. So you, as a parent, I would, I'm a dad, I'm a stepdad, and I would have been appalled if my kids came home and said, Mr. So-and-so dropped an F-bomb today and no, you wouldn't want that.
Yeah.
So, I'm a high school coach, and that's the one not negotiable, and I, with me and my staff and also our kids, and they bought in. I said, everything else though, let's create our own standards together. I don't like to call them rules. Let's create standards. Let's do it together so we can hold each other accountable. But one thing, you will not hear me swear at you. You're the assistant coaches, and I don't want to hear it back from you all. So those are some things that I think as a lesson from the classroom to the field. Yeah, I don't want to. Why should I change on the field the way I teach in the class, the way I talk to them in the classroom?
And I think what you said there is so important. There's behaviors that we've accepted from coaches that we would never accept from teachers.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it just doesn't even make sense when you think about it.
Right.
If we, and especially because we are looking for, as a society, as parents, we're looking for sport to be a place where our kids learn, grow, and develop.
Yeah.
But like you said, and I appreciate you sharing that on your journey, you saw the model of Bobby Knight and tried to emulate it. And most coaches, they're just emulating what they experienced or what they saw, or the cultural message about what a coach should be.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then it doesn't become what it could be, a growing and developing experience for the people that we lead, regardless of what level you're at, right? That should be the goal. Help them, like you said, we got to help them better at the game. They're there to improve. They want to improve. And it should be an environment about helping them get better as people, grow as people.
Yeah.
We can have both.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, youth sports should be about teaching life lessons using a sports strategy. And if we can kind of remember that, as we go along, I think we'll be much better. And we'll keep kids in sport. And research is pretty clear. When kids stay in sports, they usually do a little bit better in the classroom and also in life.
Yeah.
So I think we have to try and continue to keep those kids in sports.
Absolutely. Vince, this has been awesome. 3 quick rapid fire questions for you. First thing that comes to your mind. The most fun part of coaching is?
For me, it's just being on the field. For me, it's being on the field and just being with them.
Yeah, I love it. I wish I would have known blank before my first coaching experience.
Yeah, just having a different outlook on what I just said, right? I shouldn't be teaching one way than what I teach and do for my day job, which is teaching.
Yeah, I love that. And the last one, I know I'm successful as a coach when
couple things. Kids say, is practice over already? Then they're like, oh, yeah, it's over. That means that they're in the zone. And two, if you're a coach, they come back and they want you as their coach.
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with you won a championship or you're the championship winning coach. They want you as their coach. So
that's special.
And the other last thing is just, success to me is filling kids' hearts, right? So no child should walk around with a hole in their heart. And I think that as coaches, we should measure our success on that too.
That's so good. Vince, this has been awesome. Before we hop off, just share with people where they can connect with you.
Sure. I work for United Soccer Coaches. I have an email, which is Ganzberg, Ganzberg, at unitedsoccercoaches.org. It is a mouthful, but I'm more than happy to connect with anybody and answer any questions. But I'm also found on the unitedsoccercoaches.org website.
Awesome. Vince, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Coaches, thanks for listening to this episode, and thanks to Vince for joining me. As always, if you enjoyed the episode and want to grab a copy of the free podcast notes, just go to cuttingedgecoach.com/podcast or click the link in the show details. My practical takeaway from today's episode is to say yes to the S's: safety, smiles, skills, sweat, and simple. If we all prioritize those 5 things in our coaching, I believe our athletes would get better faster and have a better experience. And hey, coaches, don't forget to check out summercoachingseries.com to learn more or get access to our 2022 Summer Coaching Series, which includes replays from all 12 of our sessions with coaches and experts from across sports. You'll walk away with tons of practical ideas that you can apply in your coaching. That's summercoachingseries.com. Thanks for listening to the podcast.